Okay. All right. Thank you, Tessa, and thank you again so much to all of the previous panels and speakers. I've learned so much, and I've really appreciated your expertise, as I know we all have. So, this session is really about bringing together 10 apparently very different wines that are unified by two things. First of all, they're all from old vines, and secondly, they are all from Italy. Do you want to translate?
Sì. Allora, oggi è un'opportunità da fare una cosa, grazie Tessa, molto interessante per Old Vines, vecchie vigne, di avere una degustazione di 10 vini italiani, tutto di vecchie vigne.
Okay. We are pouring all of the wines sort of as quickly as we can. Please do nose and taste the wines as you have them in front of you. I am not intending to tell you what I think you should be able to taste in the wines. I'd like to give you the time and space to taste, and then for us to discuss and talk about the wines as we go through. If you could please put that, brilliant. So these 10 wines are all from wineries that have joined the Old Vine Conference as members. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the Old Vine Conference as a non-profit in a few moments. But just to take you through this range of 10 wines, so we have 2 whites from the Veneto. I propose to taste those as sort of mini flight. We have a white wine from Lazio, so from further south. We then have a wine that you have already tasted today, wine number 4, the Vinchio Barbera d'Asti from Vinchio Vaglio, as the first red. And then we move into 2 wines from Tuscany, and 3 wines from Sicily, and finally a Passito sweet wine from Sardinia. Is that okay? Okay. And I think the way to approach a tasting like this is not to look for or expect a kind of old vine flavor, but I do think that with really good old vine wines from great heritage vineyards, they do share a certain energy and authenticity that's like a backlight through the wines. So I hope that's what you find as well. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank all of the wineries who've kindly sent us these wines for us to try today.
Allora, non è possibile da dire che tutti questi vini di vigne vecchie hanno una caratteristica uguale, però Sara dice che tutti loro hanno una caratteristica di vivacità, di energia, di concentrazione, di qualcosa unica che parla della vita di una vigna vecchia. E lei dice di ringraziare tutte le produttori, tutte le cantine che hanno mandato i vini. Tutti questi vini sono soci di Old Vine Conference. Allora, per questo siamo molto fortunati di avere l'opportunità di assaggiare insieme con Sara questi vini tutti italiani, tutti vini vecchi.
Great. Next.
E lei dice, ma adesso inizia tutti, al naso, al palato, e parleremo insieme, ma per la strada. Vai avanti, Sara.
Okay. Grazie. So first of all, why bother about old vines? Obviously, I know we're here at Vinchio Vaglio. We've heard from Lorenzo and from his team why they value old vines. But I think that it's worth just zooming out to bear in mind that across the world, there's been a growing concern for this aspect of wine culture, wine heritage, and also a global and multidisciplinary awareness that agriculture is a form of culture. And this is increasingly recognized by organizations such as UNESCO, the United Nations, GIAS, globally important agricultural heritage systems, and so on. So this focus that we have in looking at the agricultural heritage of wine is not sitting in isolation. So old vines, we think, attract innovation and talent in wine. There's a kind of muse effect around old vines and old vineyards. The best old vines, we'll talk a bit more about what I mean by the best, and a good old vine vineyard really yield uniquely transcendent and really uniquely typical wines that connect us to a place and an attitude to what is beautiful in wine. The genetic material contained in old vineyards, both at a varietal and intra-varietal level, is enormously important and has already proven itself to be a kind of salvation in regions of Spain, and actually also in the New World. But also, diversity is resilience, and we have already lost so much of the genetic diversity in wine that even if we never made a wine from an old vineyard again, just as repositories of genetic material, they are incredibly valuable. Sorry, that was kind of long.
No. Infatti, quante persone ha bisogno di me? Allora, si era detto che vecchie vigne hanno non solo un'energia, però anche sono quasi magnetica per le persone che vogliono fare innovazione, che hanno talento, che hanno interesse in una cosa che è molto importante per il patrimonio, per tutto che cosa abbiamo. E non sono solo i vini che fanno. La cosa più importante è la materiale genetica che esiste nel vigneto. Forse possiamo avere questo materiale senza da fare nessun vino mai più. Se abbiamo questo materiale genetico in mano, possiamo fare il futuro, perché se perdiamo la diversità, perdiamo la resilienza delle malattie, delle peste e di altre cose. Per questa cosa non sono i vini che solo sono l'oggettivo del progetto, è questo materiale genetico, questa storia, questo patrimonio, questa energia che esiste in queste vecchie vigne.
Thank you. So another impetus for us to establish and move forward with the Old Vine Conference is that the economic and social value of old vines is deeply rooted in wine culture, but as we've heard today, this value can be lost if it is not realized in the market. And my background is that I'm a marketer, and our role and our aim at the Old Vine Conference is to bring producers together, connect them with influential voices in trade and in journalism, to create this kind of idea of a category of old vine wine as something of high value, so that there's an understanding of all the additional labor and skill and often centuries of know-how that's gone into creating these systems of viticulture that sit behind old vineyards.
Allora, il valore non è solo questo materiale, non è solo questi vini, però c'è un valore sociale, un valore economico che c'è in radice nella cultura di vigne vecchie. E per questo adesso rischiamo di perdere questo valore se non unificare i produttori che hanno queste vigne vecchie. Dobbiamo unificare loro, anche dobbiamo darle una voce pubblica, una voce con giornalisti, una voce con influencers, una voce seria, accademica, anche di valore economica, per creare una categoria di valore che il mondo può vedere come fine wines.
A little bit about the Old Vine Conference, and at this point I would really like to introduce a round of applause for my incredible colleague Belinda Stone, who is the marketing and membership manager for the Old Vine Conference and is really the engine of all the things that have been achieved that I want to sum up in this slide. So we launched in March 2021. I was one of the co-founders, together with my fellow Master of Wine, Alan Griffiths, and my mentor and supporter, Leo Austin, who's just headed home for his son's birthday. Since then, it has really grown and almost surprised me with vindicating the sense of value and power that is there to be unlocked in looking at wine through an old vine lens. So we've held 5 conferences, some online, 1 hybrid. We've had, in that time, over 2,500 registered conference delegates. So from more than 20 countries, I think it's now 25 countries, bearing in mind the latest conference. We've built a network of regional ambassadors who are volunteer supporters who help us spread the word and develop our members. We've had actually more than 22 world-class speakers, I think more like 32 speakers. And we've also been able to partner with some really impactful organizations. We were really proud to be able to sponsor Jancis Robinson's wine writing competition in 2022. They had 136 entries around old vine stories. Please do look at her website for the finalists in that story there in that competition. And we've just seen that thinking about wine and talking about old vine cracks open the viticultural and the farming heart of wine. That means that rather than it being a distant or a geeky subject, it becomes a very human and vital way of talking about wine.
Ok. Per un po' di background, tipo backstory di Old Vine Conference, è iniziato in 2021. Se vuole dire un grande ringraziamento a Belinda Stone, la sua collega lì. Dice che lei è l'engine di marketing che ha fatto tutto per questo, anche con le collaboratori, Leo e Alan. Hanno fatto 5 conferenze, qualche hybrid, qualche sull'online e qualche faccia a faccia. 2.500 partecipanti da 25 paesi e Old Vine Conference ha creato un network di ambasciatori di ogni paese per sistemare produttori, per dire la storia di Old Vine Conference, perché è importante diventare socio e come possono diventare socio, se sono grandi o se sono piccoli. Anche hanno fatto una collaborazione con tante agenzie molto importanti. Perlomeno Jancis Robinson ha fatto un concorso di scrittore di vino. Old Vine Conference hanno fatto un po' di support per questo, in collaborazione con loro. Per Sara la cosa importantissima è che il discorso di Vigne Vecchie apre la porta per fare la storia di viticoltura e anche di contadino non più noioso, però molto più personale, molto più una storia di umanità e non solo una cosa per scienza o textbook della scuola, però un discorso tra tutte le persone nel mondo di vino.
Thank you. So, how old is old? when we talk about old vines, what do we understand? There is no single global standard, and I don't think there ever can be, because it's refracted by the terroir, the variety, and the social history of this huge world of wine. But there are highly respected, credible, regional and national old vine preservation organizations who have arrived at a minimum definition. So in Priorat, in Spain, for example, to be able to use the old vine designation in wines, you must have a minimum verified age of 70 years. They are fortunate in Priorat in that they have got records, agricultural and land registry records that allow them to verify vine age, but 70 years is the minimum old vine age in Priorat.
Ok, come abbiamo chiesto, parlato tanti oggi, cosa significa old vines, vigne vecchie? Ma c'è un numero o non c'è un numero? E si era detto che è diverso in tutto il mondo, perché c'è tante agenzie nel mondo che occupano di questo discorso, di questa domanda, e in qualche posto dicono questo è il numero, in un altro posto c'è un altro numero. Per esempio in Priorat, in Spagna, loro hanno deciso che per lo minimo da dire che il vostro vigneto è old vines deve avere 70 anni. E loro possono dire questo perché c'è tanti documenti, c'è un sistema di documenti che va a più che 100 anni e loro hanno tutte le cose per certificare che le vigne sono più che 70 anni.
In Lodi, in the USA, they have a minimum qualification of 50 years as an average vineyard age. Again, they are able to verify this partly through records, but also because they have really advanced vine dating technology that we are hoping to be able to bring to and share with the global members of Old Vine Community.
Okay, in California c'è un posto Lodi e loro hanno deciso che vecchie vigne devono essere per lo minimo 50 anni. Anche loro hanno documenti, però più importante che questo è che loro hanno una tecnologia che può andare sulle vigne e fa con scienza la data per certificare quanti anni ha questa pianta. Ma fa parte della goal, della filosofia di Old Vine Conference. Sara vuole portare questa tecnologia in altre parti del mondo per certificare più vigneti con più che 50 anni.
In other parts of the world, they're working with a minimum vine age of around 30 or 35 years. I realize to an Italian, where the deep past walks among you daily, this may seem very young, but there is, I think, a really good justification, which is that all of these countries and regions have identified for them that it was around the 30 to 35 years of age that vineyards become vulnerable to A, being dug up, and B, if you ignore these vines at around 30 to 35 years, you miss the opportunity to challenge this assumption that the vines and the plants and the farming is like a consumable of wine. So by saying we rate it from 35 years, you are also encouraging a longer term view of wine, which has so many implications for wise site selection, for putting the right variety in the right place, for thinking in a long-term way, because if you know that you're planting vineyards to last, as Gianni said earlier, the fact that these old vineyards here have survived is simply because the growers were frugal and they wanted to put the right vine in the right place and do as little as possible to have to prop it up. So that's why this 30-ish years of age is very important in practice. Many of the vineyards covered by these programs in these other parts of the world, Australia, South Africa, Chile, and Spain, are much older than 30 or 35 years. But it's just you need to sort of get the vineyards into the program.
Tanti paesi nel mondo hanno deciso che per lo minimo deve avere 30-35 anni per dire che sei un vecchio vigna. Questo numero significa non solo l'età della pianta, però anche che tra 30 e 35 anni questa è la zona quando l'agronomo o il contadino decide che questa pianta non fa abbastanza esposta per reimpiantare. Allora questo numero, 30-35 anni, esalta l'iniziativa ai contadini, agli agronomi, da non spostare queste piante, da lasciarle andare, perché si lascia più che questo tempo si può dire vecchie vigne, crea un'atmosfera da pensare di più, di dove metto il mio vigneto, quale uva scelgo io in questo vigneto, da fare le scelte più avvantaggiose di ogni sito, di ogni pianta, di ogni vigneto, da pensare di più, anche di qualità, non di quantità.
And finally, just on this part, all of the organizations that I highlight here have shared either charter or a disciplinary in which the old vine designation is officially part of their production regulations, either as a collective charter of agreed behavior or through the legal designation. There is nothing like this in Italy, and it would be great to see Italian producers coming together to agree some kind of shared terms and a charter of minimum sort of standards, because this is when the market really starts to take notice and when you really start to get some impact in the market.
Tutti questi che sono qui hanno fatto una cosa legale nel loro paese per dire che noi abbiamo vecchie vigne, è diventata parte delle regole, e tutti i produttori hanno diventato un gruppo, hanno deciso insieme che questo numero va bene per loro, ha creato tipo scheda però legale che serve in loro paese. In Italia non abbiamo questa cosa e abbiamo bisogno. Per questo pensare questa cosa da vedere è molto importante, perché fa una parte dell'opportunità per old vines nel mondo da crescere, da esplodere proprio economicamente, anche storicamente, anche nelle regole e nella cultura di viticoltura.
Okay. The good news is, from the Old Vine Conference, we have 18 members from Italy. So we have seen that Italian producers, first of all, are custodians of some of the most incredible old vineyards and heritage viticulture in the world. And secondly, that they are ready to join a collective effort to amplify what their treasure. And finally, I think you'll see that these wines really highlight, I think, the really unique joy and diversity of great Italian wine. So we're going to move through to tasting the wines. And if I could ask you please to try wines 1 and 2. So wines 1 is the Soave Classico from Gini. Sandro Gini is the winemaker. And then wine 2 is also from the Veneto, a Lisson Classico. So the grape variety is Friulano, also known as Sauvignonas. But try those 2 wines against each other.
Mi sarà detto che adesso Old Vine Conference ha 18 soci che sono italiani. E per avere questo numero abbastanza alto significa che Italia è già pronta per avere queste regole, questo significanza nel mondo dei vini italiani. E adesso dobbiamo creare una voce per amplificare l'eccellenza che abbiamo e per dire di venire, essere soci, diventare parte di noi.
Ho una domanda per Sara, ma queste che abbiamo visto sulla pagina precedente sono associazioni private che si sono date delle regole interne che valgono solo per loro o hanno valore legale?
So he said on the previous on the previous slide.
I think the answer is both.
Yes.
Because he asked me, is it legal or is it just a shared agreement?
Yes, tutte e due.
It's both.
Insieme.
So they tend to start with a shared fellowship, a bit like Nizza. You know, it's a shared intention, which is kept loose and friendly.
Tipo società, però non...
So everyone can agree and move forward. And then once they've built something of value, and it's worth more to work together than it is to argue over silly little details, then they bring in the more structure. Because everybody argues. It's not just Italians who argue. So 2 wines from the Veneto. I always think the Veneto is a really interesting place to start when you're tasting old vines from Italy, because I think the Veneto is a great paradigm for this huge paradox of Italian wine, which is, on the one hand, this great concern and almost fiercely individualistic creativity and pride for their locality and the beauty of their place and their traditions. On the other hand, a big impetus for commercial success, to make money, to build an unassailable level of commercial success, to sort of feel safe. And I see those tensions a lot in Italy. You see, lots of the most beautiful traditional wine names of Italy have to go through a kind of rescue mission where they have something delicious, such as Soave, which becomes enormously successful, is then hugely expanded, and then has to be rescued from kind of industrialized ignominy with a retrofit of a Classico zone.
Exactly.
Sorry, it's a bit long. I do go on a bit sometimes.
No, va bene. Lei ha detto che non è un problema esattamente, è una caratteristica in Italia che i produttori hanno una competizione molto sana, vogliono essere grande, importante, ma vogliono guadagnare soldi nel mondo, anche una reputation, però tante volte va troppo all'altra parte e creano un successo molto commerciale, molto economicamente nel mondo, però diventa bassa in qualità, tipo Soave, ma 20 anni fa, 30 anni fa, quando è diventato una cosa enorme nel mondo, si può comprare Soave a $2 negli Stati Uniti. hanno creato questo nome di Soave molto grande, però l'impressione della qualità è bassato. Dopodiché devono fare una missione di salvare questi vini. E succede in tanti posti in Italia quando hanno creato un successo, ma tipo Lambrusco, altre cose. Crea questo
Frascati, ovietto,
frascati,
Chianti.
sì, tutto questo. E
Prosecco.
devo avere un'intervenzione per salvare questi vini. E in questo momento di interventare trovano la ricchezza che c'è sotto questa creazione che hanno fatto.
So one of the great values of old vine heritage in Italy is that it reminds the world of the lesser told story of heritage and continuity and fine wine commitment of regions that become known for commercial success rather than fine wine aspiration. So that's why I think it's good to start with these two wines from the Veneto.
Bene.
So would you mind just flicking back? So the first wine, to number one, please. Sorry, Marco. So Gini Viticoltori, wonderful producer, family owned and run. I think they're now in the 5th generation. And this is their top wine. It's from ungrafted vines on the Monte Frosca, which is one of the Ugas, the single vineyards that have been designated within Soave. The Contrada Salvarenza is their bit within this sort of Uga. And these vines have been in their family for generations. The soil here is quite sandy, so it's ungrafted vines of 100 to 120 years old, 100% Garganega. And I think that this is such a great example of what good Soave should be, in that it's like a stealth wine. It sneaks up onto the palate. It has a beautiful texture, a really lovely, long, stony length. This wine is actually very successful in the UK. What we're seeing in the UK is that this profile of Italian white wines is moving into the space that used to be taken by white Burgundy on wine lists. So this is imported by Justerini and Brooks in the UK, a top merchant. And I should just say that that Sandro Gini decided to stop adding sulfites back in the 1980s during winemaking. So this is like almost before its time, a low sulfite wine, very fresh, very intense, 2016, just getting going. And I think a great example of this unforced intensity of old vine wine. Do you like it? No, yeah. It's super wine, wonderful wine.
Added sulfite?
No added sulfites. So they use so it's basically organic production. So Bordeaux mixture in the vineyard. It doesn't add any sulfites during winemaking. Yeah. So I think it's I don't actually have the stats, but I know it's very, very low sulfites. And I think it's a very successful wine. So then wine number 2, our second pair from the Veneto. So this is almost the other side of the Veneto story. So Villobadano, they're in Lisson. So this is a denomination right on the border between Veneto and Friuli. And it's very close to the Adriatic, close to the mountains. And this is from a variety, actually, that they often call Tokai Friulano, but in fact, they're not really supposed to call it Tokai Friulano if they're not in Friuli, but actually they're in the Veneto. Yeah, benvenuto in Italia. This is one of those things. And this is also known, the variety actually it came to this part of Italy as Sauvignonas. So, vines, as we've seen, tell the social and migratory and commercial history of a place. It's like a palimpsest. It gets written across each new generation. But the reason it became known as Tokai is because when this variety was first introduced into the region, it reminded people of Hungarian Tokai. And of course, this was around the time because of the Austrians were in Italy. The Italians were actually quite keen to kick them out eventually. But anyway, this is kind of a benign, this is sort of a benign leftover of the Italian, Austrian connection, but this is why this sort of sense of calling it Tokai made sense to them at the time. But this is an intensely aromatic variety. So they're in Portugal, which is a beautiful, almost like a miniature Venice town. Once actually a really pretty powerful and influential place, the home of Bishop. And these vineyards predominantly come from vines planted in the 1940s. There are a couple of rows of extremely ancient vines which have been recuperated under the guidance of Carlo Petrucci and also Mario Fragoni, who's a great and much admired expert of Italian viticulture. So what I love about this wine is how it teeters on almost aromatic excess, and then I think the concentration and the intensity is really pulled back onto the finish with this lovely salty character. I said I wasn't going to tell you what I thought the wines tasted like, and I've done it, but...
You both first two, I don't know we put together, because they have wonderful, you said wet stone, the first one is the same, I know, it's that mineral richness that runs through both wines, and the persistence of that mineral character feels like, obviously, old wine, especially white wine, I think they really dig deep to find these, and they feel the minerals in the ground.
Yeah, it's a people often say, oh, old wines give you huge concentration. I actually don't think that great quality in wine is about concentration. I think they give you unforced depth. And certainly from a UK perspective, high quality Italian whites are probably one of the most underestimated categories in the UK at the moment. And there's thrilling white wines being made all over Italy. They're starting to become more recognised, but...
and you said filling the gap.
And filling this gap, yes. And actually, I mean, I think it would be fascinating to do, you know, an aged Italian whites tasting, because at the moment, I think Italy is in danger of sort of ceding ground to Greece, certainly in the UK. Sorry, I've just spoken for ages. And do you want to translate?
Oh, do I? No,
you don't have to. Sorry. It's fine, no panic. They can taste the wine. Sorry.
Oh, that was a lot, sir.
Oh, yeah. That's okay, just tell them she was wanging on about wines.
No, l'importanza dei bianchi italiani che sono maturi. Noi non siamo un po' più attenti a questo tipo di vino, rischiamo perdere il mercato a Grecia, perché loro adesso capiscono che bianchi maturi sono molto importanti, specialmente nel mercato di UK, e noi abbiamo una ricchezza molto più profonda, più interessante di vini bianchi maturati qui in Italia, però dobbiamo alzare la voce un po'.
Okay, and then we've got a Lazio white, but there are many parallels actually with almost the Soave story when it comes to Frascati. So you have a wine and a terroir of long history and heritage, interaction with a place, with a variety, with local know-how, which takes off and then becomes completely kind of exploited without patience in raising the value, but with a kind of anxiety to max out as quickly as possible. So Frascati, I think has the potential for being a really superb mineral white wine, and this I think is a lovely example. So it's Malvasia puntinata, which is Malvasia di Lazio, isn't it? Which is different to the Malvasia di Candia.
Mm-hmm.
So, and Malvasia puntinata, that's the cross between Muscat of Alexandria and Chiava. Is that right? It's possibly?
I can check.
Anyway,
I can check.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. This is a TV.
But anyway, so this is a family producer. They've recently joined us at the Old Vine Conference, and I think that it's so wonderful to try great examples of these styles that or these denominations that had become underestimated. And I think this is what I mean about the resurgence of Italian white wines. There is this kind of return of confidence and aspiration, and we're starting to see more and more of this kind of Italian white wine in the UK. This wine actually I don't think is exported to the UK yet, but in Italy it retails for about €15.
Sì,
And again,
sì.
yeah?
I genitori di questo di Malvasia Puntinato sono Moscato di Alessandria e Schiava Grossa.
So this is, so Malvasia is this huge family of varieties, which may or may not necessarily be related.
They're not even a family, they're a group.
They're a group, they
Because-
like hang out together.
Well, they became a brand. Malvasia became a brand, almost like, we say, okay, there's a Xerox. We're going to make Xerox copies. Not all copy machines are Xerox. Or we're going to Hoover the floor.
Yeah.
But not all the machines are made by Hoover. So Malvasia became a brand name. It was so popular that it became a brand name. So most of them are not related.
And picking up again on them, and then picking up also on what Gianni said earlier, that often these wines that turn out to be really, valuable and kind of precious are born from a kind of frugal need to survive. So this Malvasia Puntinata is very vigorous, and so in Lazio it's trained in this very sort of high guio with this huge sort of verdant wall of vigor, which is kind of harnessed. But I really love, again, that saline. I think it does have some aspects of the volcanic terroir that come through here. There's almost that lightly oily texture. There's certain weight on the palate. But I think this wine's incredible value for the balance, the intensity, etc. And again, it's this style of textured mineral white wine that Italy can do so well and so uniquely, and it's this sort of certain subtlety which, combined with the intensity of old vines, it really elevates the style and the quality. Oh, pardon me. Okay, next. So if we then move, yeah.
Characteristic that the first three wines have in common that they're underpriced.
Yeah. I think Italian white wines are underpriced.
Yeah.
Because, sorry to say this, but there's a whole side of Italian winemaking, such as, are you okay?
But I
Okay, sorry. I don't want to have some grappa for Margaret. Because, you know what, basic Pinot Grigio, basic Prosecco, it's enormously commercially successful, which has its benefits, but it drags down the idea of aspiration for Italian white wines in general. And a lot of people in the trade in the UK, Richard, they think there's only one good white wine made in Italy, and that's Pieropan, or maybe a couple of Tuscans. It's certainly in the UK, there's a kind of complete dismissal of the idea of aspiration for Italian white wines. But that's also, I think, down to the producers. The producers of high quality need to work together to start talking about their quality, which they don't do very much.
They're not in a receptive market.
But all markets are unreceptive. It's,
education.
nobody's there saying, please come and sell me your stuff,
They need educating.
Yeah.
Prices. These are wines that are sold on American. They should be something around now.
We need to educate them.
But also I think this is a bit of mean, the French are so good at holding their nerve. When they have success, they hold their nerve, they regulate supply, and they let the value go up before they let the production massively go up. And it's kind of a long-term investment and a long-term way of thinking. So that's why I think there is a bit of a synergy with old vines. Yeah.
Producers of white wines, Italy, haven't got the confidence that they can have that. No, we can. No, we won't sell it to you. We'll sell it somewhere else. If someone wants to buy it, sell it.
Yeah, and I think there's enough prosperity and stability now in many wine regions of Italy for that to happen. Anyway, that's my little soapbox. I'm not sure whether that's even translatable. Or...
I think everyone mostly understands.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So, well, I just wanted to quickly revisit wine number 4. So I asked to try this wine in this lineup. So this is the unoaked Old Vine Barbera. I would just like to say that I think joyous lightheartedness is an enormously underrated quality in wine, especially by wine geeks, and that normal humans simply love wine to be fun, not kind of facile or sort of guilty fun, but just really beautifully authentic fun. And I think that it's very important to hold on to that, and that this kind of joyous vitality is something that so many Italian wines do so well, and I think that well, I know I was talking to Mike. You were saying that you love showing people this wine, and that you always it just makes people so happy. I think that making people happy with wine, and also also what Gianni was saying about the value of Barbera as a kind of a joyous ambassador is really important. So, and also if I could just say cheers and thank you to Vinchio for hosting us so beautifully and for bringing together such a great panel. Thank you, Lorenzo. Thank you, Marco.
Grazie.
Thank you. Yeah, I've just drunk that one, yes. I'm going to, because we've had quite a few chances to try this wine, I'm going to then move on to the next 2 wines of Toscana. So we've got a sort of a more ambassadorial, sort of suave wine of Sangiovese, and then a really tense, dense, concentrated style of Sangiovese. I really love Sangiovese. I think it's like the kind of the wild, wayward genius of Italian reds, and I think it's capable of really amazingly refined and complex wines, and I think that it seems to hover slightly under Nebbiolo in the esteem in which it's held by real wine geeks. But Tuscany is not necessarily a region of Italy where you would think of there being a really strong old vine movement, because it's a region where there's been enormous investment and change and replantings, and these things are not bad. But I think it's really interesting that in Toscana there are growers who are increasingly aware that they actually still want to hold on to this connection to the past and these older vineyards. And certainly with Sangiovese, which is genetically so unstable and creates so many different biotypes, and where Massal selection seems to be becoming more and more important. So 2 wines from Sangiovese, I think in very different styles. So Coldorcia is the producer in Montalcino. Poggio al Vento, the windy hill. This is the windy...
Not the hill.
Not the hill. Place? Just Poggio.
Poggio. Brico.
Oh, it is like a slope?
Top of
the hill.
Mm-hmm. The top.
Summit.
No.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Top of.
Christine says
Yes,
I can say windy
yes.
hill.
Top of, yeah.
It's a slope.
Yes.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
Yes.
This is why I've taken 10 years to learn Italian.
Yes.
The vineyards for this wine are 50 years, but Count Cinzano is very keen to identify and support the retention of these older vineyards. And I think there's more and more people like him who do see, and also with our next wine as well, with the Fabiano, there's certainly an increased, I would say, attention being paid to the older vine heritage in Tuscany.
Against Tusco, they feels like they're really trying to look after.
That's a really good example because, you know, Chianti Classico is also, that's on a rescue mission. I mean, they're superb wines, and of course, mass expansion. And by being able to talk about an old vine heritage, you're pointing to your story as the origin of this very famous brand. So Col d'Orcia, I find this such. I mean, it's quite a big, powerful wine, but it's very suave, very buffed, lovely fragrance. I find it already very drinkable. Yeah. Buffed. Sorry. Buffed. Like polished.
Polished would be better. Sì.
I thought I said buffed.
Yes. Yeah. Polished. Yes.
Polished. That's why I mean. That's big slaying.
It's all right.
Should be fun.
Yes.
Interesting to try this wine and think about the alcohol, which is 15%, which I didn't taste.
No.
And I think the big frame of this wine is very well held. 2015, and I think just opening out, I'd say.
Yeah.
Lucky to try that.
So retail price around €100, which means like 300 in London. Thanks Brexit. Yeah.
A lovely wine.
And then wine number 6, and Lisa's here from Fabiano. Hi. So this is also a wine from Tuscany. You're in the hills between Pisa and Volterra, that's right, isn't it? So these sort of Pisan hills. And it's a cooler climate, I believe, than in Montalcino, yes?
Yes.
Yeah.
They're like, you're not far from the coast.
Yeah.
It's only 20 kilometers from the coast, which has the wind to produce our tortilla. So it's not much unique. 100 meters high hills. And I don't know if I have to go on that.
No, you should. No, please, yeah.
And so we found this very old, the family, I'm not the property of the estate. The family found this very old vineyard and the estate when they bought it in the 90s, and they decided to maintain this vineyard. Normally everybody used to, destroy the older vineyard while they decide to maintain there. So it's a really big heritage that they have in the area. I don't know under other white beef, this area, that's 4 times.
I think there are pockets. I've come across pockets of them. And this is a very different style of Sangiovese. I find it much more rocky, more stony. It has a certain austerity. That sort of it's quite sort of bloody, and with a hint of that orange, that burnt orange. Do you get
blood
that?
orange,
Blood
Tarraco orange.
Yeah. So, there's so many different ways for old vine wine to be delicious. I mean, these wines are so different in personality and style to the old vine Barbera, but I think this is also the enormous strength of Italy in that there are so many ways in which the wines of Italy are beautiful and compelling. There's so much diversity just of tone and approach. So So there you go. Even in Tuscany, which is almost thought of as a newly created fine wine region, there's still great heritage. And do you know who planted your 100-year-old vineyard?
Actually, I don't.
No.
Because, well, we have documents that say that Fabiano was a farm producing lots of wines, but we don't know the
No. And is it planted to Guio?
part.
And how is it planted, the vines? Do you know?
They are here grafted,
Yeah.
actually. Of course, there's not
Yeah.
not wheels, not cardon,
Yeah.
in there left free.
Oh, they like bush vines.
Albarello.
Albarello. Yeah.
Similar to Umbrian.
Okay.
It's less than 2 hectares of vineyard, and it's really difficult to get some photos, but maybe somebody's interested that some vineyard.
We can connect you. Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys in the UK?
Yes. Yeah. And Chipatella is in spread market. Tiny quantities.
Great. Thank you. So that's two wines from Sangiovese, Toscana. So we're now going to move to Etna. We have 3 wines from Etna. And whenever I'm with anyone from Etna and I say Sicily, they say it's Etna.
And they do.
Don't call us Sicily.
Yeah.
Has anyone been to Etna? No. Yay! Okay, incredible place with a very particular microclimate, and actually a relatively cool and relatively humid microclimate. So those of you gone, you know it's extremely lush and green and beautiful, with this enormously poetic sort of paradox with the terrain, the sky, the sea, the sky, this lushness, and then of course the smouldering volcano, which seems to like follow you around in a mostly benign way. And Etna, and in fact Sicily, but particularly Etna, has really become a bit of a hotspot for old vine nurture and heritage and recovery, because of a kind of benign neglect, which Gianni also picked up on earlier, in that actually, because Sicily, I think it's fair to say, for many years was slightly left behind the economic progress and investment that came into especially the north of Italy. And because of this, there are a lot of old vines in Sicily and around by Etna. I mean, incredibly ancient heritage of, well, humanity, culture and farming on Sicily, a melting pot of the world. But Cusimano, so the Cusimano family, major winery owners in Italy, they've recently initiated this project in Etna, and he was saying, actually, we found lots of the vineyards had just been abandoned, and some of them have just gone too far to recuperate, but there's a lot of recuperation of these old vineyards on Etna. So we've got 3 wines, all from Etna, so wines 7, 8 and 9. You can see them all in turn on your tasting sheet. So wine 7 is the Altamora Guardiola Etna Rosso, 100% Nerello Mascalese, 150-year-old vines. Wine number 8, the 2019 Viticentenari del Vino Petra from I Vinieri, that's Salvifotti's project, which is predominantly Nerello Mascalese with Nerello Cappuccio and Grenache, at least 100 years old. And then the 2016 Rovitello Particella Albarello Centenario from Benanti, Nerello Mascalese and Nerello Cappuccio, also at least 100 years old. Some of these vines they suspect are much older, but sometimes the records just don't go back far enough. So really this is, I think, a really fascinating little corner of really ancient vineyard heritage in Italy. Albarello trained, and it's kind of a bit of tension that's going on around Etna in Sicily because it's becoming such a fashionable place now. Salvo Fotti, who's the winemaker and viticulturalist behind the I Vineyari collective, was telling me that there's actually so much demand for vineyard land, even in Sicily and in Etna, that he's even seen projects that propose to move soil in to, So I think that but I think this is really important for us as wine traders, writers, and so on, to really give our attention and our consideration to the people working really well and with real, genuine commitment to these old vines. So do you want to try wine 7, 8, and 9, these 3 expressions of old vine heritage from Etna, and see what you think?
There was also no phylloxera there because the aphid.
Yes, and they're ungrafted. So no phylloxera because of volcanic soils and the louse can't survive. Yeah. Thank you so much.
They're too good to spit out. Good.
So if I say that sometimes Nerello Mascalese reminds me of Nebbiolo, will they be angry with me? No. Am I allowed to say that?
Sì, lei ha detto che Nerello Mascalese qualche volta sì, somiglia a Nebbiolo. Sì.
Assomiglia al naso un po',
Yeah.
Sì.
consistenza in bocca.
Esatto.
Insomma, un vino
Sì.
molto in eleganza.
Yeah.
Sì.
I always think that.
Okay.
Anche i tanni, the tannins.
You know, one doesn't like to.
No.
Okay.
Yes.
I don't.
You can say it. You can say it here, but don't say it on Etna.
Okay.
Second spread.
You're supposed to say that Nebbiolo reminds you of Nerello Mascalese when you're on.
Yeah. Well, of course, so wine number 9 has a little more bottle age because it's 2016.
Is this a very good you'd know, sir?
So let me see the Benanti wine. So wine number 7, Cusumano. Yes, that is available. All of these producers are available in the UK. So this is actually, I'd say that these old wines from Etna have succeeded in capturing the attention of some very high quality importers.
Yeah.
And in fact, if you want to get hold of the I Vineyari wines, which are imported by Les Caves de Pérenne, they're pretty much on allocation now. So they've been extremely successful, and I think deservedly so. So wine number 7, the Cusumano, I find this in a way that almost sweetly fruited. What do you think?
You can look there.
It has tannins in it.
Yeah, good.
I think that's it to you. And just
It's actually very supple and flowing onto the palate. Very fine, sort of mouth-filling, but very fine tannins. And I think it's probably the most sort of, if you like, amenable of the 3.
yeah.
Are you familiar with I Vineyari, wine number 8, this project? So some people are. Is it okay if I recap? So I Vineyari is a project led by Salvo Fotti, who's a native of Etna and a very accomplished and admired viticulturalist and consultant, consults lots of big companies. And he became concerned that the skills that, like Gianni was talking about earlier, like, you know, these contadini who know they had to know their plants because they couldn't get anyone else to know them. And he was concerned that this skill, this know-how of this land and these vines and these old bush vines was being lost. And he identified that it was a big loss of status in agricultural craft. And he essentially got together a group of vineyard owners and, you know, the old timers, and created this collective where they hold on to their land as well, because that's important. They want to hold on to their land. They hold on to their land, and basically it's a kind of almost mini cooperative. And what he was successful in doing is in recruiting young generation to come and work, because it was seen as a high quality product. He lets them know where the wines are ending up. And I think that something he said to me, I really have stuck in my mind. He said that we have lost the respect for agricultural craft, farming know-how.
He also made the move to stop people from tearing down their palmentos.
Oh yes, the palmentos, the traditional winery
pressing mechanisms
sort of pressings,
that were driven by donkeys, the big stones and wooden. They're all non-mechanical, but they're like beautiful feats of technology.
Yes.
And people were just, barns were collapsing.
Gravity flow.
Yes, exactly.
Designed, very ancient, beautiful structures.
And he went around helping people to not tear them down. So.
So this is where you see sort of social history, agricultural culture, and farming of old vines really goes hand in hand. And it's all been part of creating this sort of tapestry of narrative and quality and real distinctiveness around the old vines of this region. Their big challenge, though, in general, remains acquiring skilled labour in general across Etna and Sicily, because they don't have a lot of immigration. So wine number 8, which is not just Nerello Mascalese. You also have Nerello Cappuccio and Grenache. So and this is the blend that's planted in the vineyard.
What's the story behind the Grenache?
Probably Spanish. So there's also Canonau in Sardinia, is Garnacha. So there's a bit of, have you come across this competing narrative? Some say, it came through the Aragonese.
Yes.
Because the Aragonese had a big dominance, Spanish travellers in, Sicily and Sardinia. And then there was some research that suggested that actually Grenache originated in Sardinia.
Judging this year, was largely our table.
Yes.
Did you have someone from Spain and someone from Italy?
Yes. No. There's always one Italian enologist, and that's who causes the fight.
Yes, Grenache, also Italian.
Yes, Canonau.
I mean, I think I love Grenache, and I think that it brings an incredibly, I love the texture of Grenache. It kind of opens up the texture of a wine, like a gauze.
Like the rest of Australia.
Yeah.
The texture of those wines.
Yeah.
Same texture.
And so in wine number 8, I find it's intense, but it sort of has this, hovering breadth across the palate, which I find really compelling. 14% alcohol, completely integrated. And then wine number 9, 2016, Rovitello Particella number 341 from Benanti. I really like how this wine is really starting to kind of get going on the intrigue of the aromas. 750 meter altitude, field blend. I could just sniff this all day, really.
Yeah.
It feels like it's gone from the attitude of like a sweeter fruit,
Yeah.
Younger, it's moving from that sweet. still the fruit's there, but
Yes.
savoury character and other elements are just coming
And
in.
now it's like pomegranate syrup and just iron, and it's so wonderful.
Started to just change the narrative a little bit on the dose.
Yeah.
So I think these wines, I mean, it's intense, but there's also something quite ethereal about it, which I think is very compelling. So, you know, we've tried 3 white wines and 6 red wines. They're all very different in style and tone. You know, if they were soundtracks, they would be completely different genres, you know.
But they'd make a nice symphony together.
But they would, yeah, and I think this is sort of the consideration with sort of old vine wines, is that you can think of them as like beautiful gems on a charm bracelet almost, but they it's not that they have the same flavour, but when you put them together, there's a kind of shared, just intensity and vibrancy and particularity. They're so of their place, every one of these wines. And so then finally, we're going to finish off with a sweet wine, a Passito wine from Sardinia. So I don't actually have very much information on this wine. So, because yes. So do you want to just drink it? So, well, you want it. So Canonau, aka Grenache. So southeastern bit of Sardinia. Grenache either came from Sardinia or was taken there by the Aragonese, depending on who you're speaking to. Passito wine, so dried grape wine. That's all I can tell you. And so let's try it and enjoy it. And thank you so much. And I'd just like to thank our hosts again. Thank you, Presidente. And thank you to you for your attention after a very long day. Okay. Thank you.